But yeah, you want
Well,
to?
I think you probably still look good. So
I look like crap.
why? Did you do something just
man.
normally really sort of hasty this morning with your appearance?
No, just the usual. Put the hat on.
The usual filth.
I just put my hat on and I'm ready for the morning.
Wow. That's tough.
Well, I got to get the kids to preschool and whatnot. So
yeah.
I don't generally shower before I do that.
Well, yeah.
Normal people shower in the morning?
That's why I actually shaved my head. That's my news.
You did?
I did. Shaved my hair off.
What?
I did. All of it.
You have super thick, awesome hair. Why would you shave it?
Because I'm sick of bedhead, man. Sick of it.
Yeah.
No, it's hot. It got hot, and I'm sick of
hot.
dealing with
Oregon.
it.
I know what hot is.
No, I have no room to complain. But I look at my son. He's 6, and he buzzes his hair, and I just find myself getting jealous, all kinds of jealous. So I went into my local Great Clips, and there's always
I've seen the sign. It's a $6 special for the shaving of the head.
Yeah. So there are always women in Great Clips, and I have a great relationship with all of the women in Great Clip. They've all cut my hair, but this one day, apparently they were busy and short-staffed, so they started shipping in other stylists from other stores. And
screwed up.
As it happened, there was a dude there with a shaved head, cutting hair, and I happened to get him. And I had been thinking about doing this for a long time, doing something bold. And I said, I think I want your haircut. He said, okay. And then I was done. And I love it. I love it. Of course, then I realized, why am I paying anything to have somebody shave my head? So I went over to the, local Target, and I bought myself some shears, and I shaved my own head a week later.
Wow.
This was last week. So I just shaved my own head. It worked. I shaved my own head. Who knew? So I'm taking
that's army crazy.
It is army crazy. I love it.
When I was a kid, that was the summer thing, and I hated it. I have bad memories of the head shaving because I always felt very self-conscious about it, kind of like a dog does when you can kind of tell the dog's a little ashamed when they get shaved.
Yeah.
You ever notice that?
Yeah, no, I noticed that.
But my dad would do, he had a, when I was about my oldest son's age, 9, I remember my dad had a shaved head and a full beard, which I think is a pretty cool look. That's kind of a hipster look, I guess.
It's a kind of a Portland look.
Yeah.
It's either that or completely wet shave bald. Because I still have hair. It's just buzz cut short.
That's funny.
But yeah, if you wet shave and sport a full beard, that's hipster Portland.
Pretty cool. Well,
so
I'm not heading there.
So I was telling you, I got a new rig. I'm testing a new rig.
Yeah, let's hear about it.
Summer travels. Well, Apple had their new announcements. Can't believe we haven't talked about any of this stuff.
I know, and I didn't even pay that much attention. I mean, we did talk a little bit about the MacBooks, and I saw a story.
Yeah, we talked about the Retina displays.
Yeah, and I saw somebody had taken on the challenge of getting the most expensive new MacBook possible, and how much would they possibly spend? And it was like they ended up close to $9,000, but this included peripherals and an additional screen and
that's not even like a thought experiment anymore. It's just obscenity. I mean, it's like there's no rational I can't find it. There's no real rational reason to price something out like that. And I think even Apple would note that's great for the one person in our market that would actually spend that kind of money on that machine, but that's not really what's right. And what I think is most interesting about it, if you price out, take the new Retina display MacBook Pro, if you price it out with the equivalent specs, like on the Venn diagram where the Retina display and the old school 15-inch MacBook Pro cross over, and you spec it out exactly the same. There are some things you can't do, obviously, on the old MacBook Pro, and some things you can't do anymore on the Retina display. So if you price out all the stuff that you can get exactly the same, the Retina display MacBook Pro ends up cheaper than the old school MacBook Pro. which I find really interesting. Like it turns out that the display is not the most expensive sort of component. I think that's pretty common knowledge. It's the flash, the big, the big memory flash drive. When you get that up there into that 768 gigs of flash storage, that ends up being a spendy proposition.
So it makes it super fast, right?
Yeah, it's ridiculously fast. I had put a 480 gig SSD, old school SSD, now, in my older MacBook Pro, and it was like a brand new machine. I mean, it was unreal how fast it was. And that was even on the slow end of MacBook or of SSD performance. And, since then the technology has gotten much faster and it's amazing.
So you're cutting just a little bit. What is this new rig you're speaking on?
Well, and I don't, that's a little frustrating. So what I'm doing is, I went out to, I got tired of actually carrying around the big 15.4 inch MacBook Pro. And so I knew I've been planning on selling it for the longest time and replacing it with something smaller. And so when the announcement came out that that Apple was, had revved everything, I got very excited about the MacBook Air.
Yeah.
And so that's what I got. I got the 11.6 inch MacBook Air. So I went, I took a significant size, hit on size, and I love it. A friend of mine was over and we were talking about how slick it is. And she said, it reminds me of the 12-inch MacBook Pro or MacBook Pro, the titanium MacBook Pro back in the day.
Yeah.
And that was my favorite computer I had ever used, like this, which now by comparison seems like an absolute tank. But this is what it feels like. I mean, it's like that size, that form factor, just kind of folding it up and kind of putting it in your pocket almost. It feels great, but it doesn't have the sacrifice you make on size. It obviously doesn't have an Ethernet port, and so I'm on Wi-Fi, which I usually really recommend against for podcasting. It's a terrible way to fly. But I'm also about to leave for 2.5 weeks on a summer vacation. We'll be working from the lake, and so I need to test it. So I wanted to make sure it works.
So there's no way to get Ethernet on.
There's a Thunderbolt to gigabit Ethernet adapter, which is fantastic because it gives you, an adapter that actually gives you gigabit Ethernet. But I won't have access to Ethernet at all from the lake. It's, strictly Wi-Fi. So, I just wanted to see how this works. And
Lake Chappaquiddick?
Lake Chappaquiddick. No. It's not. It's neither of those places. Lake Chautauqua.
Well, I don't know. It's
just
I'll never probably remember that.
No, it's good.
No,
it's you don't have to remember that.
Chappaquiddick.
I don't really care if you remember that. So it's so anyway, I'm loving it. It's the 2 gigahertz Core i7. So it's the faster of and it's really, I mean, it's unreal how much power is in this little tiny sliver of a nothing.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, do you even need an iPad now that you have that?
Well, I mean, I still do a lot on the iPad, but what I do that I can't do on the iPad is stuff that I don't know how I would ever be able to do on the iPad. It's like, Sound Soap and noise filtering and Logic Pro production and, Lightroom and
Sound Soap. I want to look that up.
It's one of those, it's one of those things that, where the iPad really excels and is just wonderful. There's just sort of because of the business that I do. I even downloaded, Coda and Diet Coda from Panic Software, where it's their coding tools, and Coda 2 is unreal, and Diet Coda on the iPad is great. It just I'm just not that good at thinking about code on the iPad. stresses me out. I'm just not there. And with a keyboard, I'm much more there. So it does make you think at first, gosh, the size is so similar, like really so similar between these two devices, the iPad and the 11-inch MacBook Air, that you'd think, well, surely you don't need the iPad. But really, just because the size is the same, the function is very different. So,
well, you got the best of all worlds. You got no room for complaints over there.
Of course I do.
You got a shaved head.
No, of course I have.
You live in Portland.
I could complain all day long, and I'm going to start right now. Number one, they've changed the stupid MagSafe adapter, and now you can't, like, it's now the MagSafe 2, and it's all thin and shiny and aluminum and awesome, but it doesn't work with any of the old adapters, and so you have to get this $10 little tiny converter to use your MagSafe adapter with your now MagSafe 2 port on your MacBook Air, and that's a stupid thing. Because we have adapters everywhere. They're like in every plug. And now I have to carry around this $10. It's just dumb.
I'm sorry.
And then, no, there's more. I love the screen. The screen is gorgeous. But, I can see the benefit of having a Retina display on this computer in particular. So I think the next generation or the generation after that, whenever they roll the Retina display down into this, into the MacBook Air, that is an immediate upgrade for me. Like I feel like this is a form factor for a travel computer that I can't imagine. Like I'm home. But boy, the second the Retina display hits, this one's out the door. I'm getting a new one. So that's it. That's my story. You think I can't complain? You think I can't complain?
It's never enough for you.
No. This is the first world, baby. I can complain about all sorts of stuff that matters little to the rest of the world.
A friend of mine who's a very he meditates a lot, does lots of yoga, lives a very, very simple life. He sent me an article of was these these journalists who were just so proud that they were still using their like 10-year-old Macs, and someone had written this article, I guess, about how the Mac is such a great machine for owning for years and years and years, but they had these things they had to do to make it still functional, like stripping all kinds of things off of it, and but they pretty much used it for typing articles. And I thought that's pretty much the opposite of Pete's approach. I mean, some people just really pride themselves in taking something beyond reason, like having a computer far longer, like driving a car into the ground, I mean, you just, right. At some point, the principle is the only thing you're clinging to there, because it's time to upgrade. You keep yourself right ahead of that curve. And I don't think there's even bad economics at play with that one. I think you got to get that rhythm right. You gotta sell
really
while
important.
It's still worth something, and buy it while it's hot.
It's like this. It's like Portland. The whole city of Portland, is designed from an urban planning perspective for pedestrians, not for cars, right? So all the blocks are a little bit shorter than a normal city block,
or by comparison to Salt Lake, which was designed for what did they say? It's so you can do a U-turn with your
with a horse and buggy
and your wagon or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. That's
huge.
The same thing. I grew up in Colorado Springs. All the
pedestrian friendly.
All the streets are giant. Like it takes 5 minutes to actually cross a street because it's like a football field.
Yeah.
And it's all for the like four horse and cart
exactly
kind of mentality. So, but Portland, the streets, if you start at the south end at the top of the hill of downtown and start walking down at a normal pace, and you get that rhythm right, you will never hit a red light. Right, you are the priority, and you'll be able to walk all the way down to the river without hitting a red light.
I didn't know that.
It's really
awesome.
Cool. It's really, and you may even be able to work in a break to take a sip from one of our beautiful Benson bundlers. Please come to Portland. So now it's like that with technology buying. That's my theory.
No,
right?
Is it really?
Yeah. If you start at the top of the hill and you buy your tech, and then
did you just barely think of this one?
Just a second. Yeah, no, I'm just kind of on the fly. I'm thinking of it as the words come out of my mouth.
Okay.
and you
I'm trying
stay
to
and
keep
you
up.
sell it when there is still value in it, especially when you're in a brand that tends to hold value. Then you can weather just about all of the kind of upgrade storms, and stay ahead of the lights every single year or 18 months, and get yourself new gear, and the overall investment ends up being just sort of a it's kind of a consistent bleed rather than just having it.
It's like paying a tax.
It's like paying a tax. It's exactly what it is. It's more like a lease. It's a lease from yourself. That's the way I look at it. And so, I sold the MacBook Pro I had for way longer than I normally would. Like, that was a machine I kept probably too long, and I didn't get as much out of it as I would have liked to have done. But I can already tell at the rate they're sort of upgrading these MacBook Airs. I mean, they were just released. The next day I got one, and as soon as I feel like the next bump is coming, I'm ready to sell it. It's on Craigslist, and I'm starting to talk to people about it. And same thing with the iPhones, the iPads. Get them, lock in those resale deals, and you're always in new gear, and it doesn't end up costing that much. That's a terrible way to live.
There you go.
It's a terrible way to live, but I love it. That's my vice. It's my only vice.
You got to have something to live for.
Besides that's it.
I mean, something's got to make life interesting. So you were telling me about a new book did you just read this book, or what is this book?
Oh, I think this is this is just a funny neuromarketing piece. It was a review of this of a book I thought was funny on the neurosciencemarketing.com blog. It's the post is called "We All Lie and Cheat, but Not Much." It's a review of the book "The Honest Truth About Dishonesty: How We Lie to Everyone, Especially Ourselves." And this is Dan Ariely, who is a regular neuroscience writer, is a fascinating guy, and wrote this book about how we think about what is okay to steal. So let me just read this passage. The majority of the work described in the book was done with Ariely's supervision or participation, and, as we have come to expect, his experiments are often delightfully simple, yet still revealing. One such test involved leaving either cans of Coca-Cola or a plate with an equal number of dollar bills in dorm refrigerators at MIT. Unsurprisingly, the soft drinks quickly vanished, but despite the presence of an adjacent vending machine that would have converted the dollar bills into the same cans of Coke, the money remained untouched. Ariely thinks we are conditioned to believe that stealing money is wrong, and most of us won't do it. An item that isn't actually money, like the disappearing colas, are a different story. Similarly, many people might not think twice about taking a ream of paper home from the office, but would never take a few dollars from the petty cash box. So,
yeah.
I mean, I wonder, that seems, I'm glad that there is now, that he did some research to shore that up. And yet it seems so obvious to me that.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's right. It's one of those things that it's not new information. It's just, it's now verified in some scientific way, I guess. I mean, it seems like, and you can sort of run through the reasons, I guess, like anecdotally, that you think things like that happen in society. I think part of it is, and when you use, the example of like cash on the table or whatever, I think my first assumption is, the thought that people tend to have in a social environment of what sort of an emotional impact that theft would have. So if I steal $5 in cash, I mean, it says something about me that was such an obvious, immoral, unethical thing to do, but it also probably made you feel very violated, and now you don't trust me, and now, like, our whole relationship is damaged. But if I take copyrighted work that has an equal value, there isn't the same immediate social impact on my relationships. So that's, I think, part of where, people start to justify things. And it's all about justification, I guess.
Rationalization, exactly.
And the I guess your ability to be close to the impact of that on other people. If you can feel really removed from that, then you can justify it more easily, I guess.
Well, that's it. Let's see. I think there's sort of a positive kind of reinforcement that comes with when applying this same logic to intellectual property theft, which is because I think many people who I don't know. I mean, I haven't read this part of any research to support this, particular wild-haired idea. But if you're someone who doesn't steal cola, right? You don't go steal a soda off of the thing. But then Game of Thrones comes out. And you're really mad because you want to watch Game of Thrones, but you don't get HBO.
I don't know anyone like that.
And you realize in that great oatmeal comic we've talked about before, that tap tap tap, it's really easy to find Game of Thrones because somebody has, feeling just like you, dutifully reposted it, onto the internet, onto the file sharing sites, that you can go and click and download it and find it really easily. It's not hard to do. The response ends up being that you feel sort of good about taking that content because you feel like
you would have gladly paid for it had they made it convenient for you.
Yes, you would have gladly paid for it had they made it, and in fact, you probably actually purchased season 1 yourself on iTunes when it came out. And then you got into it and addicted to it, and now you're just mad and you want to, quote, send a message. And so I think that ends up being kind of that reinforcement mechanism where you feel like you're going all V for Vendetta on these things. You're putting on your mask and you're you are an advocate now for those who just want to be able to pay for content.
I have a friend, by the way, he actively downloads music that he otherwise should be paying for, and I don't know how he gets it, but whatever, some Pirate Bay-ish site. But his justification is that if he likes the music he's listening to, he goes out of his way to see them live when they come to town. And if he really likes them, he'll buy their merchandise. And he feels that they get that money, a higher percentage of that money, and the band is better off than if he just bought their album.
But see,
say iTunes.
That's the same kind of weird rationalization, right? That you feel like you're sending a message that the industry, the record industry needs to know this, needs to hear this message. So you're going to, withhold your, potential revenue for them, by taking the music.
No, you're cutting out right now.
Well, I can still hear myself though.
Okay. Okay.
That's all right.
Got it. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, you don't really matter as much right here.
Okay. I'll pretend I hear everything.
Well, that's it. As long as I still make some sense. We'll see if you respond to the question I'm going to ask. Fine. That's good. So, you're withholding your potential revenue for the industry by making sure that the band, in your construct, that the band is getting all this money. That's your rationalization, right?
But don't you feel, I mean, in some way, the recording industry, when it was like Hillary Rosen led, the RIAA, fueled a little bit of that sentiment with, at least with a younger audience, that they created. I mean, they weren't wrong in trying to defend the musicians who created the music, but they created a strategy that seemed very much like the lawyers were running things, and music was they made the music industry look like a big business when it really should look like a collection of artists.
Yes. No, I think that's absolutely right. I think that the recording industry ended up, appearing to be a cabal of attorneys and no one else, making really strategic and technical decisions about how to proceed in this era of bits that they clearly did not understand. And once they did appear to understand it,
to me that was just a very, I mean, honestly, kind of a sad, example of, because I think in all industries and companies, there's a balance generally between, say, the PR department and the legal department. I mean, at some point.
But in this case, you're talking. I mean, you
are constantly trying to protect your brand, to protect your company, and protect your interests, and protect your employees, and all of that. But you have to balance that with looking like a friendly, comfortable, happy, whatever. And I just, I think with when Napster happened, and I think caught a not a very nimble industry off guard, they took this very extreme approach that seemed like it didn't have the proper input from PR folks who might say, "Hey guys, let's okay, we're gonna we want to protect." Well, what it appeared, I think, and this is where I think things really fell apart for them, and set up some, I think, like dilemmas on a grander scale. The kind of dilemma you're talking about set it up on a grander scale than we've, I think, seen in a long time. But they were protecting a business model more so than they were protecting the artists that they represented.
What's interesting about what you just said is that it assumes that the audience for music has any interest in hearing from attorneys or PR people at all. And I think that's really the problem. That's what allows people to get away with the rationalization, because you feel like if you're hearing from attorneys or PR people, you're hearing from, quote, the man.
Yeah.
And that's who you're rallying against. That's the whole reason you put on the mask and start downloading. But when you see the public face that is the artist, the independent artist who's just trying to, make ends meet, like that, that plucky startup U2, it's probably not a great example. But you are more interested in doing it.
And I apparently think when you look at artists, still gets they still have a hard time with their fans. They created, they took on that whole Napster thing when Napster was a very popular thing, and they just somehow got sucked up into that same sort of perception, that they became sort of a corporate band, and I don't think they were really ever wrong, to say, hey guys, this is the way it works. We make music and you pay for it, and we get to eat and make more music, and this is the way it works. And but somehow that I think a lot of people really miscalculated the kind of thing you're talking about, that, when you go from looking at, I guess at an artist or at a musician for their work, and you start to think about, like you said, the lawyers and the PR people and everything else that backs this kind of giant machine, it does take all those things to make it all work. But when you're thinking about those things and not the music, then a lot of things go awry.
Right. And so, I wonder, I don't know. I mean, I wonder if that has sort of passed. I mean, I just don't hear the same sort of arguments with the same frequency now that I heard, say, 3 years ago about it from the recording industry in particular. I think their strategy has changed. And I think in a lot of areas, we've seen a shift that doesn't necessarily deal as much in kind of the punitive damages. We have a lot of these legacy lawsuits that are still going on from 3 years ago, that you hear about occasionally, where somebody is charged with, $18,000 per track that they downloaded, that kind of a thing, which is just this level of kind of ridiculousness that, and the argument ends up being that, would you ever, if somebody steals a physical CD out of a record store, a physical CD out of a music store, and tries to get out and is caught, would they be charged $18,000 times the number of tracks on that CD, for damages? And no, they would not. They would not do that. So it ends up being magnified by the amount of sharing that they end up doing, with that digital file. Are they sharing it with, the rest of the world after they steal it, or are they just kind of listening to it? And there's no way to really tell, I don't think. I mean, in a way that's really reliable. And so it ends up being this just big mess. And so some of the new response ends up being, I think, kind of more rational, which is, if you're caught, they're going to take they're going to start limiting your use of internet. You'll get this sort of, it's really a dumb idea all around anyway.
Well, there clearly is
just more warnings. It's just increasing the awareness and more warnings. I don't like, Europe has gone hogwash. France has become a complete mess. With this 3 strikes, you're out. You end up doing any sort of copyright infringement. Then they say, what's going to happen is if you get caught, then you're taken offline. You are not allowed to use the internet at all, for some period of time. And that's a terrible idea, because, the internet has become a utility. It's like, are you going to tell somebody that they can't flush the toilet for a year, or, have electricity or light for a year if they do something, illegal with their electricity? It's a terrible idea all the way around. But what I'm hearing is that the RIAA is trying to address this from a more rational, or trying to find a more rational technical approach. I think what I was going to say earlier is that, when this first started happening, it was very clear by their response that they didn't understand what's going on. Now they do understand what's going on. They still don't have a really sound way to address it. And what no one ever did, I think, apart from the indie artists, but no one ever did early on from the industry perspective, is try to use a more positive PR approach that says, we're going to increase the value of the music, and we're going to make it available because we know that there is, and we see evidence that when the music is out there and when fans have access to it, they end up spending more money on merchandise. They end up spending more money at concerts. The overall ecosystem thrives. And it's a matter of just kind of changing the model.
Yeah. And the model was in need of inevitable change, I guess, that the industry was very resistant to.
Right.
And the bottom line from way back has always been, convenience and accessibility, and treating customers like, thoughtful people who can make decisions for themselves. I remember at the time that this whole, I keep referring to Napster, but it really was kind of a watershed moment. And it was during or shortly after that little era, there were several states who got big payments from, I don't believe any labels were necessarily implicated, but it was a very key sort of middle person distribution agent that had been charged with collusion in pricing CDs at the retail level. So the fact that at the time, many CDs were priced at around $17, and this was regardless of their quality or how soon they'd come out or whatever. And this was back when it was far more common to see like a Sam Goodies or can we even remember the name of record stores?
Yeah, right. Like
I'm thinking of Sam Goodies, but
yeah.
Back when there were record stores all over and they mainly sold CDs. Anyway, they proved the case. And I remember Utah got millions of dollars at the time, and all of that money was directed to the libraries, and the libraries bought CDs with that money. But it was millions of dollars, and it was a price fixing scheme. And it just was this to me, it was the timing was very interesting, because people were saying, all of a sudden people were mass downloading, and record industries were saying, well, it's because, people are criminals and, something's wrong with society. But consumers were by and large saying, we just really want the access and we want it convenient. And one of the arguments, that comes up is the quality of recording. And wouldn't people pay more for higher quality? And this is comparing things like vinyl, tape, and, sort of the media that had been available up to that point. Why would people want 128 MP3? Well, convenience and portability tends to win out. And the industry was very, very slow to really respond to that, because it harmed a business model that had a predictable profitability. And these are publicly traded companies, and they just didn't really know what to do. In terms of taking that positive approach, I mean, what were they really going to do? And still, what are they going to do? Do they get more involved in tours and promotion? And, for the most part, historically, record labels didn't make any money on, and still don't make money on most, like tours and concerts and live events. That seems inevitable to me, that becomes more a part of their revenue.
Well, to that point, and back to Ariely's book, here's another passage that I think is interesting. Ariely describes an interesting conflict of interest experiment that had subjects evaluate art. So let's assume for a second that art is that we can transpose art for music or some other similar consumable. Each item is marked by the name of a gallery, one of which is identified as a financial sponsor of the subject's participation. Several findings were significant. Number one, the subjects experienced a preference for art from their sponsor gallery. This preference was observed not just in their overt choices, but also by using fMRI to measure activity in the area of the brain associated with pleasure. And the more people were paid by their sponsor, the greater their preference. Of course, neuromarketing readers won't be surprised to find that the subjects denied their opinions were influenced in any way by who paid for their participation. This work shows that your doctor, your financial advisor, your auto mechanic, and others may be recommending unnecessary services and products that benefit them, but may not be consciously aware that their opinions have been biased. So again, not terribly surprising, but nice to see continued support for this area of research. It doesn't necessarily surprise me to know that payola does exist, whether we know it or not. The end.
It does. I know. The world, the world of radio stations and do you feel like like when you used to buy like Radio Time, you dealt with the stations, and there's that whole sort of, you get the back end gifts and concerts, and like there's just this whole world that I think is a step back in time, and it's another world that you just wonder how they're hanging on, the payola universe of radio.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's the other piece of it, though, is like it applies directly to brand allegiance. And you see so many more. I mean, a lot of what's changing in advertising, you're seeing more and more kind of, and I think this is fostered in large part by the change in the advertising model that comes with online media. When you see more and more sort of broadcasters moving to this kind of Howard Stern model, where the sponsorship is handled through live reads, and we used to do a lot of live reads too, right? And pay for live reads, and the idea is that the talent, the radio talent, the broadcast talent, who has the direct allegiance of the listener, right? Actually is reading the spot, saying, I really this one really stuck out to me. I'm a big Instapaper fan. I love Instapaper. You know Instapaper?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I love it. I live on Instapaper on my iPad. It's a fantastic service where it allows you to take articles that you want to read, and click a little bookmarklet that you save to your Instapaper account, and that article is stripped of all the formatting, and it goes to your Instapaper account where you can read on your iPhone or your iPad or Android device later, and it's a service, and it's I pay $3 a month or $3 every 3 months, like $1 a month. It's ridiculous to kind of support the service. And Marco Arment, the developer, just bought sponsorship on Howard Stern, and so for like a week, Howard Stern was doing these live reads on his show for this talk about plucky little upstart software developers for Instapaper. And so you hear Howard Stern, whose fans are arguably some of the most loyal of any sort of radio broadcast, right? Say, hey, you know what I really like? I like Instapaper. Nah, yeah. Bring in the Barbies. I mean, it's like, and talk for
good.
Like 45 seconds about how great Instapaper is. That blew me away. And yet,
well, my parents were here a couple of weeks ago visiting, and my dad has discovered the TuneIn Radio app for his iPhone, and he listens. He and my mom are both huge fans of like vintage radio programs. So he woke up one morning, was eating breakfast, and he's playing one of the original Dragnet episodes. And
wow.
And I was listening, and I think the guy that plays Jack Webb was the guy who also did him on TV. But throughout the program, there were these pauses for live reads. So the character who sort of steps out of character, this is so-and-so, of Dragnet, and I love smoking Cools. Cools, the great cigarette. And like then the whole program has sort of a single sponsor, and the characters. And I was just listening to that thinking, man, that is effective. That I can't believe that we don't see more of that today with, DVRs and skipping commercials, and certainly we do see product tie-ins and product placement, and there are other ways that advertisers have sort of evolved, but that's something I'm just sort of waiting to come back at a bigger scale, where an entire brand gets behind a program, and the characters, endorse the product. I mean, that was really effective advertising.
Well, that's okay. 2 points. So the first one is back to the Stern point and to your smoking cool point. That's where I think about this idea of sponsorship and allegiance comes in. And you put somebody in fMRI and you say, how do you feel about Instapaper, and whether or not they are a Stern fan should determine the extent to which their pleasure centers are lighting up. Right? Like their allegiance to Instapaper will largely be affected by, their allegiance to Stern, or there is a correlation there, maybe not a causal effect, but certainly a correlational effect. And I think that's fascinating. And I think that's why, that's where the power of live reads really comes in. It's if I start smoking Cools, there may be an unintended connection, at least one that I am not aware of, between my love of Cools and my love of Dragnet.
I was going to say, I would say there's probably a connection between your love of Cools and your shaved head.
Well, that's certainly not unintended.
Because I think you should probably start wearing white T-shirts and vintage
rolling them up
Levi's
in my sleeves
with that shaved head and smoke Cools.
That's totally it. That's going to be my new look.
That's going to be cool.
So, so I think that's really interesting. And you think about that yourself. I do that myself. There are certain podcasts I listen to. And the repeat sponsors, if I look around my office, I find myself, using the products that I've heard, time and time again. I think the appropriate idea here is that you line up the product with the celebrity, with the show or whatever in a way that, so I'm not, I wouldn't want, well, this is a hard one, I guess, my example, because as you were pointing out, the Instapaper Howard Stern alliance maybe seems like the audience isn't quite right for the product necessarily, but he's won over some people. But I think where has the biggest impact is if you really can kind of line up, like, who do you think the audience is,
and what product are they likely to tend towards. And if you can get that lined up, you're going to have more success.
Yeah, no, I think that's true.
Do you find yourself when you're watching Mad Men? I mean, you're more likely to watch the commercials that run during Mad Men than you are for another show. I think the commercials during Mad Men, by and large, are the good ones.
I can't really respond because I still don't watch Mad Men.
Oh, that's weird.
I know.
Really?
I need to, but maybe I'll get into it. Maybe I'll jump in on Netflix while I'm on my
oh
hiatus.
My gosh, you don't watch Mad Men?
Not at all. Wow. I tried. We've talked about this. I tried. I watched the first 3 episodes. I didn't like it, but everybody says, "Oh no, you got to get through the 4th episode." Oh, great! All right.
I still have never seen season 1. In fact, so I started in. I think I started in on season 3, maybe, and then went back to 2, if I remember correctly. But boy, I hang on every episode.
I'm still. I haven't finished. I'm 2 episodes from finishing.
Well,
Game of Thrones.
You're gonna have to take my word for it. The commercials, the advertising is actually really good, and so the assumption I'm making here is that, and I think I'm correct, that the advertising community loves Mad Men, and I don't know what their true demographic is, but I think I think AMC has quite a money-making machine there, and they have been able to sell like great ad space. It's really some of the best advertising runs during Mad Men shows. I'm telling you, you'll have to tune in.
I will tune in,
or at least at least for the commercials.
Well, and that's
why
it.
I watch the Super Bowl.
That's the trick. We don't. Let's see. Is AMC? See, we don't have any cable. We have no cable. So we have no AMC. We have no nothing.
Like, you are almost off the grid.
I think that'd be a stretch to make that case.
You know who does live off the grid? One of the characters from Mad Men. Apparently, fun fact I read this week that he doesn't even have a working toilet at the moment.
That's trouble. A character or an actor?
Isn't that strange?
Which is it? The actor?
The actor,
like the real life,
no,
real life.
I mean, not the character in the story, but yeah, one of the actors one of the account executives that for the firm in real life apparently lives off the grid.
Fascinating.
I mean, I'm sure that's a PR spin on he's undergoing a renovation at his home and doesn't have certain amenities.
Yeah, at his $5 million mansion in the Palisades, and he doesn't have a toilet now today.
Temporarily,
but when it comes back, it will be plated in gold. So I would just add to that to the Howard Stern thing. If you go back and listen to episode 80 of Build and Analyze at 5by5.tv, you hear Marco and Dan Benjamin talk about his experience on Howard Stern and what that was like, and he talks at great length about the process of deciding, because you brought up a really good point, is that the right audience, and for a software product like Instapaper, and he put a lot of thought into that very question and talks at length about it, and it's really fascinating on to think about why he makes that brand connection with Howard Stern and why it ends up that it made a lot of sense.
And that's really cool. That's honestly, that's where I think advertising still has some magic, is when you have to make gut level decisions like that, because I think it's great that marketing and advertising is so data driven, and there are a lot of great ways to to target that there weren't before, and online advertising and that sort of thing. But at the same time, I think to me it's sort of a beautiful art when you have to, when you can't predict everything, and is that the right decision to make for all parties? Because of course Howard Stern has to make the decision as well. He's certainly happy to be paid, and you would think would take on anyone with money, but he can't really. I mean, there are products that if you're putting your name behind it and doing live reads and that kind of thing, you have to be, everyone has to be on board, and you don't always know how that's going to play out.
Absolutely.
I think that, to me, that's what that's one of the areas of marketing and advertising that I mean, magic maybe isn't quite the right term, but I just think that's just a fascinating thing. You run that through and think, okay, how's this really going to work? Because you're going to kind of bet the farm on it.
Right.
I mean, something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of every marketing dollar, more or less, I would think, for a company like Instapaper.
Yeah, I mean, it's a company, he's very focused, and you hear him talk about the decision to go cross-platform, which was, he's an iOS developer, and he never wanted to go Android, and came up, and it ended up that an enterprising Android developer said, all right, we'll take a risk. We'll kind of share the load. We'll do all the development and support, and you won't have to do the work, and you license the, space and the underlying technology to us, and we'll see how it goes. And now, as a result, Instapaper's on Android, but he is a very considerate, sort of conscientious person, and that Build and Analyze shows when I can't recognize or recommend highly enough. If you are if you're technically minded and like to hear sort of the behind the scenes of the decisions that go on in development, it's a
That's
fascinating
very interesting.
show. Yeah.
So you're off to Chickawitapwa.
I'm off to Chickawitapwa, and so we're leaving later this week, and so I'm square to do the show, assuming I still have internet. So we'll keep moving, and so we'll be back in. I'll be just doing the show from the lake next week.
How cool! Well, I'm jealous. That's a cool trip.
Yeah, it'll be good. I'm looking forward to it.
I mean, it's probably. I mean, what that's been able to do to your gray matter and your life wisdom to be able to go to that every year, it's immeasurable. I'm sure if we were to sort of stand next to each other and we could see how smart, and sort of measure that like you measure height.
I think
you're
actually
so far ahead of me. There's no way I could catch up at this point.
No, it's
really
this,
10 years now?
Yeah, but it has nothing to do with gray matter. It is actually height. Going to this makes me a little bit taller than you. And that's what I count on.
You eat well.
Yeah. Well, I'm gluten-free.
That's true. That's probably, yeah. I'd probably lose a little bit of this little belly I'm growing. I've been noticing a lot of pregnant women around lately. It's that time of year, right? You sent out that birthday chart.
Yeah.
You posted that.
Most popular
August
birthdays.
was sort of huge, right? July, August sort of jumps up a bit.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't actually remember. I remember it being interesting.
Pregnant. That's my point.
I
need to
remember
go gluten-free.
You feel pregnant. I'm sure mothers everywhere disagree.
I'm gonna get a girdle.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been good, Dane. It's good to hear your dulcet tones again. I think we're done. Are you done?
Yeah, there goes the bell.
All right.
Done.